Politics columnist for The Hill, joins us on this Thanksgiving. And Joe, part of me wants to say, look, the president can spend wherever he wants for his vacation. That's his choice. But at the same time, it's the messaging, right? With rising inflation, supply chain issues, it doesn't send a great message.
It doesn't. And Benjamin, I'll look at this from a different perspective as well. We'll talk about inflation and the backdrop on that in a second, but there was a national tragedy that happened in Wisconsin this week. It was a massacre. It was a man who drove a crowd, drove an SU-3 through a crowd and hit grandmothers, hit children, killed an 8-year-old boy, 6 dead, dozens in a hospital. We haven't seen such an insidious act like this in this country in quite some time. And the president has barely acknowledged it. You may recall in 2020, after Kamala Harris was chosen as Joe Biden's running mate, she actually visited Wisconsin and the family of Jacob Blake. But here we have the president jetting off to the $30 million home of a private equity banker, a billionaire. The optics are horrible on that front as well. To your point, when you're talking about the messaging, it has been patently poor from this administration when it comes to inflation, when it comes to supply chain, when it comes to gas prices, when it comes to the border or Afghanistan or education. From the get-go, they seem to be out of touch with what the American people are thinking and feeling, and perhaps that's why the president is now polling in the 30s, only 11 months into his administration, the largest drop we've seen for a president since World War II. He was in the 50s when he started. He's in the upper 30s, low 40s now, and it doesn't appear to be getting any better, Benjamin.
Yeah, well, you raised that deadly attack in Waukesha the other day, and MSNBC's Rachel Maddow has been facing backlash for her decision on Monday to ignore the suspect in the deadly attack. Maddow made no mention of Darrell Brooks Jr., nor to his extensive criminal history, just hours after the police chief announced charges against him. Watch.
Wow.
A just unthinkable crime took life after life after life after life. At a holiday parade, a red SUV inexplicably sped into the parade route and then directly into people marching in the parade.
And while Maddow gave Brooks a pass on Monday, she completely skipped reporting on the parade massacre at all on Tuesday.
Wow.
How can you explain that, Joe?
That's amazing. Remember, Rachel Maddow is MSNBC's top-rated host. That's like being the skinniest kid at fat camp, but still, she has the most people watching at that particular network. And with great power comes great responsibility. But in this case, she decided to practice the most insidious bias of all, and that's the bias of omission, pretending something didn't happen. Much like the administration isn't talking about this all that much. It seems to be in lockstep. But the overall coverage, Benjamin, as far as this being called what? A crash suspect, this person. Yeah. A crash implies an unintentional act. It's like an accident. Oh, no, the car drove itself. No, of course not. The charges here were, what was it exactly? Boy, it was more along the lines of intentional as far as vehicular murder here, in essence, vehicular homicide.
And Joe, we've actually got some critics who called out the media for this. Just take a look at this, because they called out the media for the deadly car ramming, and they called it a crash. While at the same time, Joe, they labeled the 2017 Charlottesville incident an attack. You see some of the headlines here, CBS, Associated Press, CNN, just a few examples. Twitter users also quick to call this out. One saying, if you're referring to the Waukesha incident as a car crash and the Charlottesville incident as a car attack, we can all see what's going on here. And other media outlets reducing vehicular mass killings to crashes is blatant news coverage malpractice. It's been remarkable, and it's been across the board, frankly, Joe.
It's amazing, right? What we saw in Charlottesville was a horrible, horrible act, and the person that carried that out shouldn't see the light of day for the rest of his life. And obviously, the media coverage was overwhelming after that attack, and rightly so. But why aren't we seeing it here as well? The Rittenhouse trial basically dominated our news coverage for the past month, yet this attack, while we're still seeing reports on it, as far as this SUV attack on innocent people, I'm not seeing the editorials that we normally see in these situations. from the Washington Post, from the New York Times. I'm not seeing the outrage on other cable news networks as far as the opinion people coming out and condemning this particular suspect and say that he shouldn't see the light of day for the rest of his life. Instead, it seems like almost it's the news cycle is slowly carrying this away when it should be the top story for many, many days, because there's still people in the hospital in critical condition at this hour, Benjamin.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, thanks so much for sharing some of your day with us today. Thank you.
I would say Thanksgiving to you, but I guess you don't celebrate that as a Brit. This is kind of like a regular day for you, so it's not a bad day to work.
Dual citizen, Joe. I'm a proud American.
Good for you, man.
Yeah.
All right, go Arsenal.
Go Chelsea.
All right. Joe. Take care.
All right, well, the jury finding all three suspects guilty in the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. Many saying this shows just how well our jury system really works. But for some, it's still just not enough. And then there's this.
These elected officials should be arrested for negligence. They are responsible for caring more about the criminals than they care about the civilians.
Division among Democrats over lax bail rules that allowed the suspect in the deadly Christmas parade to go free many times. But the White House still standing behind progressives on the issue. Legal eagle Guy Lewis is here to sort it all out next.
A Fox News alert on the legal and emotional fallout of the guilty verdicts in the Ahmaud Arbery case. The jury convicted all three defendants of felony murder. The Arbery family and the prosecutors saying justice was served, while defense attorneys indicate they will appeal the decision. Jeff Paul is live in Brunswick, Georgia. Hey, Jeff.
Yeah, Benjamin, a huge sense of relief for many here in the community of Brunswick, Georgia, who've been following this case very closely. You could tell out in the crowd yesterday outside the courthouse. A lot of people were nervous as the jury came back with its verdict. But once the judge started to read their decision, folks inside and outside the courtroom could not contain their emotions.
Count 1, malice murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty.
And one by one, each of the defendants were found guilty on several counts of murder. Travis McMichael, that's the man who physically shot Arbery 3 times, was found guilty on all 9 counts. His father and the man who recorded a portion of the shooting were each found guilty of a combination of several counts. All will likely spend the rest of their lives in prison. Now, the family of Ahmaud Arbery says justice has been served. They and folks like Reverend Al Sharpton commended the jury that had disproportionately been made up of 11 white jurors and only 1 black juror. Many believe the jury's decision sent a loud message that people will be held accountable for their actions.
And let the word go forth all over the world that a jury of 11 whites and 1 black in the deep South stood up in the courtroom and said that black lives do matter.
Now, attorneys for William Roddy Bryan, that's the man who filmed a portion of that shooting, say that next week they're going to file a motion for a new trial. Meanwhile, the attorneys for the McMichaels say after sentencing, they plan to appeal. Benjamin?
Jeff Paul, following all of that live for us in Brunswick. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Well, the verdicts in Ahmaud Arbery case come on the heels of the jury's decision in another high-profile and racially charged case, the trial, of course, of Kyle Rittenhouse. Legal scholar Jonathan Turley writes that both trials actually show the transcendent strength of our jury system, as in both cases, 11 white jurors and 1 black juror found unanimity based on rule of law. Guy Lewis is a former U.S. attorney. He joins me now, and happy Thanksgiving to you. These have been 2 very high-profile cases, both that got a wide array of media attention. Interestingly enough, biased media attention on both. But I want to start with the Washington Examiner op-ed, which says that the conviction undermines everything the left has said after the Rittenhouse acquittal. Quote, in the end, the justice system worked, proving that white supremacists cannot lynch an innocent black man and walk free. This, of course, defies the narrative promulgated not just by the loathsome cretins dominating corporate newsrooms, but also a president and his congressional allies who smeared a young man as a white supremacist for killing 3 other white men. In a sane world, this could be cause for celebration and a vindication of anti-racism. Do you see a double standard here when you watch the media cover these 2 stories?
There's no question that the media always seems to track one way on these cases. And it's unfortunate because those of you that have served on juries, there's nothing easy about serving on a jury. My experience is, having tried a lot of cases, jurors go back there. They take it very, very seriously. They try hard. They look at the evidence. In both cases, Rittenhouse and the Georgia case, for example, they deliberated for days. They asked questions. They looked at the evidence. They looked at the law. And I think in both cases came out with the right result. And yet they've got to worry about mobs outside, the media following them home. And everybody knows what that's about. It's a shame because jury service that our founding fathers included in the Constitution may be one of the most critical rights we have. And we shouldn't take it lightly.
I want to talk about the Christmas parade massacre in Wisconsin, which has reignited the debate over bail reform. Prosecutors freed the suspect, seen here, Darrell Brooks, on just $1,000 bail just days before the massacre. This despite his nearly endless rap sheet that includes a series of violent felonies. But progressives like the squad members doubling down on criminal justice reform, calling even for an end to cash bail right after the deadly rampage. The backlash was swift and includes some from fellow Democrats. Watch.
It's beyond belief what's going on. These elected officials should be arrested for negligence. They are responsible for caring more about the criminals than they care about the civilians, than they care about you and me and everyone else. People being arrested again and again back into the streets. What does that do to law enforcement? What does that do to the rest of us? They are pathetic. It is shameful.
Very well said. I mean, what is it doing to law enforcement? It's not allowing law enforcement to do their jobs. Bail reform in this country is an absolute disaster. This guy was out on $1,000 bail. Then he was set at $5 million bail, which many would argue, why set bail whatsoever? Because there could be crowdfunding money that comes in and somebody could post that $5 million cash to get this guy out. And he shouldn't have been out in the first place. He should have been behind bars.
Boy, Julie, you are spot on. In the federal system, where I generally practice, you have this concept called pretrial detention. In other words, there's some crimes, Julie, that are so bad, and you look at that you're detained automatically pending trial. And in this case, when you look at this guy, he was a one-man crime wave. I mean, he had a rap sheet as long as your arm, going back over a decade. And for a judge or a prosecutor, or in this case, anyone to let this guy out with his criminal history and his record, boy, oh boy, he should be the one to have to stand trial because it's just pathetic.
Yeah. All right. Guy Lewis, thank you very much. That's all the time we have. Happy Thanksgiving. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Likewise.
Benjamin.
Thank you. Well, despite so many mandates across the country, there were more COVID deaths this year than last year. And the White House is in full flight mode when it comes to criticism, saying, bring it on. Plus, you know the deal. It's cool to eat food off the floor if you use the 5-second rule. We'll tell you what researchers found out when it comes to picking up that fallen piece of turkey today.
Now I'm 4 or 5 seconds from what
I took him at his word when he said he was going to get COVID under control. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, more Americans have died this year than last year under COVID.
Republicans are tearing into the Biden administration for their handling of the coronavirus pandemic, as COVID cases are rising under President Biden, despite his campaign promise to get the virus under wraps. Not to mention loads of mandates and restrictions across the country. White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain clapping back on Twitter, saying, quote, let's be clear, the day we got here, 4,000 people a day were dying and 1% of Americans were vaccinated. Today, deaths are down 75% and almost 200 million Americans are fully vaxxed. We still have a lot of work to do, but if anyone wants to have a debate about COVID, bring it on. Dr. Nicole Saphier joins us next. She's a Fox News contributor and a certified radiologist. Doctor, thanks so much for being with us on this Thanksgiving. And I just wonder, it was a year ago that President Biden was elected, and yet here we are today, still under these intense mandates. Vaccination rates still perhaps not where they should be. Do you think that the president overpromised during the campaign?
Well, to think that one president or one person in general can either be the complete success or failure of this global pandemic or the national pandemic as we're seeing it is nonsense, utter nonsense. And when we saw so many promises being made during the campaign trail, that's all they were. They were just campaign promises. And now, unfortunately, mixed messaging has really blundered a lot of our response, especially once President Biden took office. There have been a lot of missteps with the CDC. They have not been fully transparent when making their decisions. We've seen that there has been influence from some lobbying powerhouse, such as the teachers' unions. All of this does damage credibility and makes Americans more skeptical, and it makes them question the public health authorities in general. We already saw politicization of science in the pandemic throughout the Trump administration, but it didn't stop once President Biden took office. Unfortunately, I believe that it got worse. But I can tell you on this Thanksgiving, there are a lot of things to be thankful for. The fact that over 99% of Americans over the age of 65, the most vulnerable, have been fully vaccinated. Over 30 million people have received their booster shots. We have over a third of the Americans had already gotten COVID by the end of 2020. Now that number is likely twice that. So when you add vaccine-induced immunity with natural immunity, there's a reason the deaths and hospitalizations are continuing to go down. We are still seeing a rise in cases, but that is from some of the breakthroughs, and we're going to see that as this virus becomes endemic.
So with all those figures you just pointed out, isn't it now time just to start living with the virus? I mean, I feel like that as much has been done as is possible, that now we need to move away from some of these extreme mandates and controls and just learn to live with it.
Well, especially as we're starting to talk about what we're seeing right now. For the last several weeks to about a month, the CDC has reported 0 deaths in Americans under the age of 30. In fact, the vast majority of people who are still dying from the coronavirus have either chosen not to be vaccinated, have not been exposed to the virus, so they don't have natural immunity, and they have a comorbidity, such as being overweight. These Americans are choosing to not get vaccinated. They are choosing to have, whether they're obese, if they know at this point what the risk factors are for severe illness, they have to take proper precautions. So the rest of the Americans who have chosen to be vaccinated, at this point, it is time to move forward as a nation and start removing some of these barriers, especially while you have vaccines have opened up to children over the age of 5. But according to CDC data, over half of these children have already been exposed to the coronavirus, have natural immunity. So we need to start removing some of these restrictions.
Yeah. Now, I've got to get your view on one other topic, please, Doctor, because everyone has heard of the 5-second rule. We've all done it. But is it really cool to eat food off the floor? What researchers found might make you think twice, apparently, about picking up that piece of turkey today. See, they tested different foods dropped on 3 different floor types: tile, wood, and carpet. And the results showed that all foods picked up bacteria, no matter what, some more than others. What do you make of that? I mean, I would say surely if it's a peanut butter sandwich and it falls face down on the floor, you should probably avoid it. But if it's a potato that's rolled off the table, probably all right.
Well, this is where my microbiology degree and my mom had actually, they kind of have a discord here because, first of all, 5-second rule, in my house is an okay thing. You have the hygiene hypothesis that say you have to be exposed to some germs to keep that immune system robust. But let me tell you, when it comes to like uncooked meat surfaces, especially turkey today, better not pick up anything that falls on that because Salmonella, E. coli, some of these can be quite deadly pathogens. So please make sure you're cleaning up everything. Please make sure you're washing your hands. You don't want cross-contamination because COVID's not the only thing that can make you sick.
I mean, I don't know about your households, but I find that there is more food on my floor than on the actual plates anytime I feed my children. So I say just eat right off the floor and save me the step of having to wash the dishes. But I guess that's probably not so sanitary. So I guess I'll continue to use plates.
That's where a good dog comes in handy.
Yes, I have 2 dogs.
That's
they
right.
really enjoy lunchtime. They really do. Yeah.
Dr. Nicole Saphier, thanks so much for being with us today. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours. All the best.
Thanks, you.
So the president's poll numbers may be tanking, but Hillary Clinton says it's not his fault.
There is a real vulnerability in the electorate to the kind of demagoguery and disinformation that, unfortunately, the other side is really good at exploiting.
Backlash over her suggesting Americans are gullible and they just don't understand the president's accomplishments. Next.